You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, everyone. It's Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern. You know what that means. It's time for Global Trade This Week. I'm Pete Mento, and with me, as nearly always, is my good friend and my co-host, Doug Draper. Doug, how's it going, buddy?
Awesome. Pete's going great. I love it today. It's like you said, it's Monday. My daughter just graduated from college yesterday, so I'll talk a little bit about that at halftime. But yeah, the sun's out. It's supposed to be warm. Jesus, I said I wouldn't talk about the weather.
You did, and you just did. You just did.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's okay,
Right.
buddy. Men of a certain age.
I know. That's true.
Men of a certain age. It's just
I
how
literally, like when the countdown was happening, Pete, it was on number 3, and I said I'm not going to talk about the weather. And within 5 seconds, I'm talking about the weather.
Can't be helped. Don't get me started on how glucosamine and chondroitin is making my hips feel better. It's like let's not even get into it, man. You know,
Yeah.
let's try to keep the old fart stuff to a minimum this week.
Yeah. Well, you're in D.C., and we were just talking about you heading over on a 6-hour flight over to Los Angeles. And then
Yep.
Thursday night, forget your seminar. I'm talking Thursday night. What do you got going on?
Karaoke, baby. We're gonna do some karaoke. I'm so fired up. I love karaoke almost as much as I love giving seminars, Doug. So I am fired up. I'm fired up, bro. I can't wait. And I'm sorry I missed everybody last week. I was in Maryland and in Pennsylvania on sales calls with our team, and it was great. But I couldn't make it this week as usual. Podcast Jesus did a passable job. I watched the show. Passable job of filling in for me. But youth and exuberance will never overcome old age and treachery, Doug. I'm always going to be a little bit better. It's just all there is to it.
I love it. Well, Keenan did a great job. I thought the show was pretty top notch last week. So the fact that you said adequate means that it really was good.
Yeah, I didn't say mediocre. I mean, I'm giving him B+ for this one, but
Nice.
got to give him something to work toward. Well, Doug, enough of our weather talk and preliminaries. You're up first this week. So what do you got, buddy?
Yeah. When I was putting these topics together, Pete, I didn't realize that they're both of them are kind of parcel centric, right? And I think they start there, but it's a bigger theme around these two. So Parcel and the United States Postal Service, I talk about that a lot. And my tone's going to change a little bit today, Pete. Not all the way, but a little bit of the way, right? So I saw something last week that said the post office is considering changes, right? I use air quotes with that, of where package consolidators can inject their volume into the USPS network. Now the majority of it is dumped into what's called the DDU, the Destination Delivery Unit. So that's the furthest to the end customer, right? So FedEx, UPS, and DHL does some consolidation. Let's control it. They control it as far as they possibly can in the supply chain, and then that final mile gets dumped into the Destination Delivery Unit. Well, now the post office is saying, well, I don't think we want to clog up that final little location in the system. We need you to interject it further upstream, right? So there's like a destination sectional facility. There's an origin sectional facility. And so the post office is saying, hey, don't give it to us at the DDU. Give it to us at the sectional level or even further back up, right? And so some folks are all in arms because of a couple different things. One, the benefit of controlling it all the way to the DDU gives the traceability, the control primarily, and you're going to lose control if you insert it into the postal system higher up the food, the stream. So what happens in the 2 or 3 days it takes to go through the USPS system and then pop out for final delivery? So there's concern about delays, clogging the system, all that kind of stuff. There's also concerns about price increases. So if the post office says, hey, we're actually moving this stuff further through our network than we have in the past, so we need to charge you a little bit more money, right, for that. And so there's this dynamic of who controls it and how much is going to be charged by the post office for having that longer control. right? So the one piece that I've heard, which I think is pretty legit, right, which I've heard is that, is this a way for the post office to try to muscle out some of these consolidators and try to create a relationship directly with the entity that's actually shipping the product? To say, all right, well, you can't give it to us on this far end. You got to give it to us in the middle or even further upstream. Will that create price impacts where the post office could go to the shipper and say, listen, why don't you just work with us directly? So part of me says they got some chutzpah on that one, man. They're getting it done. They're using some flex. They are making it happen because they have this Delivering America network overhaul, which isn't the same as the network overhaul they did 2 years ago and the one they did 3 years ago and the one they did 5 years ago, because they're always looking to overhaul and come up with some new buzzword. But I got to give the post office a little bit of credit here for kind of strong arming these consolidators and FedEx and UPS. I'm afraid that they're going to buckle when the big boys come in and start pushing back. So I think it's still the same old USPS. I do appreciate that they're trying to flex a little bit to take some more control, but ultimately, because this isn't happening yet, they're just quote unquote considering it. I'm not really sure if it's going to make a whole lot of difference. So have you heard about this, and do you have any take on it?
Didn't hear about it till you brought it up. First of all, Doug, I'm very happy that I'm sitting down because it sounded for a moment like you were praising my beloved USPS. So I'm glad I'm sitting down. I had to double check my Fresca to make sure I wasn't day drinking. It's still just Fresca.
Okay.
I'm just blown away, Doug. I have followed up on it since you sent the topic in, and I think this is part of an ever evolving postal service. You talked about redoing the network, redo the network. Things evolve or they die, and this is part of it. I think where the postal service is grasping onto an opportunity are all of these 301, minimized or deferred duty opportunities that e-commerce shippers are starting to glom onto, and they see themselves as having a fabulous network that's very fair priced to be able to do this. So we're all going to sit back now and see if they seize the opportunity and, correctly make money off of this, if they can find a way to monetize it in the way that it deserves, or if it'll be another instance of the FedExes, UPSs, and DHLs of the world doing a better job based on a simple model that the Postal Service already has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. They got the handoff coming their way. I don't think things are going to change, Pete. And 2 years from now, they'll have another network optimization, yada yada yada, and not much will change. But I will give them some kudos. I think they're trying to flex. So,
Doug, people can get better.
Yeah,
things can change. It can get better. I had to send something to a friend of mine down in Atlanta, and I went to the UPS store that was nearby. And, they wanted $21 to deliver it. I was like, that sounds ridiculous. And I went down to the UPS, Department of Postal, on Sunday afternoon, used the machine, and I sent it for like $9. And it's going to get there the exact same time it would have gotten with UPS. You cannot deny the power of the infrastructure. I know that they have management issues. I know they're not necessarily the best to get along with from a business standpoint, but you cannot deny the infrastructure, my friend.
Yeah. All right.
Listen
Good deal.
All right.
Yeah.
Repeat.
I'm
Enough.
just leaving it at that. We got a couple more topics, so we'll just leave that one behind. What you got for your first one?
Well, as has often been discussed by my my venerated partner, the West Coast is having a hell of a revival, as you expected that it would later last year when you started bringing all this up. And all of the trades, Journal of Commerce, American Shipper, all the trades are pointing to one interesting phenomena, and that's in a world where imports and exports appear to be limited to what they probably were prior to the pandemic. So a good market back before COVID happened. We're beginning to see both shortages of capacity and increases in cost. And that's having a lot to do with a couple of effects. One of them being the fear of a pending East Coast strike. So that's pushing a lot more freight over onto the West Coast. The issues that are going on in the Red Sea, that also has something to do with it. But also there appear to be constraints on equipment. There are fewer ships because of operating costs. So they've got to try to make as much money as they can on as low an operating cost as possible. It's not just the U.S., though. You're also seeing rates increase into Europe. So this is a sign of health, in my opinion. It's a sign of health, and it's a sign of good decisions that are being made by ocean companies to try to make as much money as possible on routes where they can be profitable. This is probably going to be a milestone in the recovery past COVID, where we'll begin to understand what high cost rates are going to be for the next few years and what the low cost rates will be when things are pretty slow. And hopefully we're seeing a bit of an evolution by the people that manage and run these ocean carriers to try to keep themselves as financially healthy as possible without just going out and trying to gobble up as much capacity as they can. So I see it as a good thing, Doug. Even though it's going to mean things costing more, I think it's a good indication of a healthier global trade.
Yeah. Yeah. Couple things. I think during the downturn of our industry, right, that the spot market rates were more favorable than contract rates. So everybody was trying to play in the spot market, which is just a downward spiral, right? And I think at some point it's more like enough is enough. We need to make some changes, and so the spot market, you just lift that up, right? I think they're going to lift it up by controlling the capacity. Like you said, there's not as much ships into service. And I like how you spun all of that, and it sounds very politically correct. But as we've said, this is kind of a mafia, right? And they can do whatever they want. And the spot market is too low. So let's pull some capacity out. Let's take advantage of global chaos in some degrees, and let's make sure the second half of 2024 is not going to be the same as the first. So I agree with you without question. I think the ends or the means to the end is a little bit different. Maybe not as glamorous as you may think or politically correct. You got some mafia guys in there. I mean, I'm being way out of line maybe, but let's just rebound and reset the spot market because it is absolutely insane.
I've looked at it a little bit differently lately, Doug. This came to me about a year ago. I look at the ocean providers more like farmers. And here's why. They have the ability to reduce capacity so they can constrain the amount of supply where necessary. And they can also constrain it and redeploy it, hold on to it in times of need, and they can surge it at times of need, not unlike people in the farming and agricultural industries that are involved in commodities who may hold grain. They may hold, certain crops knowing that there's going to be a more expensive time of year to be able to deploy them. The big difference here is that, there's generally not mass collaboration amongst farmers to do so. And that has happened in the past with cooperatives, but it really just has more to do with their ability to constrain capacity. And a belief that we all have that they collaborate on that. So I think that's where the big difference is. They're like a giant co-op growing corn, buddy, when you get right down to it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the premise to a mafia movie that you just described as you were talking through that. I'm like, yeah, that sounds familiar. Probably 1970s Godfather 1, 2, or 3. There was a Godfather 3, right?
3 sucked. Yeah, it was not good at all. Coppola's daughter was in it. Just not good. 2's the best. 1's a close second, but it's like 1A and 1B, in my opinion, 2 of the best movies ever made. How dare you stain the memory of those incredible pieces of cinema? Who do you think you are, Doug Draper?
Well, I am a co-host of this show that's going to pivot quickly into our halftime, which, as everybody knows, it's provided and supported by Cap Logistics. Please visit them at caplogistics.com. And the halftime is also fun because we can talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about. So it is that time. So, Pete, you got a good one, buddy. Let it rip.
Yeah, I love the Tom Brady roast. I just wanted to just get it out there. I howled in my chair for most of it. There were some parts that were duds, but for the most part, I really loved the roast. I'm a big fan of the concept of organized roasting. Having your friends all get together, getting people together at a table, giving folks the microphone and having an opportunity to just positively rip apart a friend of yours. It is a long-standing comedic tradition. I particularly like the fact that people all had a good sense of humor. There were some points where things went over the line. There was one where Tom Brady got up and said, "Don't say it again." But everyone on that Diaz and even people who weren't present got a good ribbing. And I don't think anyone really got their feelings hurt. I think that's a good thing, Doug. I think, comedy is supposed to push boundaries. It's an art form. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. And in order to be a part of that, you have to be willing to not take things so personally. So I thought it was an excellent, excellent roast. And I thought that it might be, hear me out, Doug, it might be a symbol of a turning point in our culture that maybe we can laugh at ourselves again.
I like it. You're very optimistic on this show, Pete. I like that. Was there, you got the Dean Martin back in the day. Could you tell, was anybody noticeably inebriated?
Oh, God, yes. Oh, for the love of God. Gronk was plastered. Have you watched it, Doug?
No, I mean, I know what you're talking about, but I've not watched it.
Give it a watch. Gronk was clearly hammered. He does a shot of vodka or tequila or whatever and spikes it. And apparently some woman had like a piece of glass sticking out of her face from it. As the night went on, and it was a long roast. I think it's been edited down to 2.5 hours, but I think it was like 3.5 on when it was live. People were getting liquored up, and probably none more so than the host, Kevin Hart, who I don't know what he had been on that day, but he was blasted by the time it was over with. So Gronk definitely, Edelman definitely, the football players, they were there to have a good time. So
yeah,
I don't think Tom Brady was. He was okay. He was funny. He was okay. But no one comes close to what Nikki Glaser did. She's redefining what it means to go up and roast somebody. Jeff Ross was fabulous. And I particularly enjoyed when Bill Belichick got up, was able to make fun of himself and everybody else. And it's okay. It's okay. Like, I think he's rehabbing his image, Doug. I think he's trying to get cuddly, but the number of jokes about how he didn't have a job, about how, no one wanted to re-sign him, and he just sat through all of it. It was fabulous.
Huh. Cool. We'll have to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Well, I'm going to jump into it's graduation season, and I just attended my daughter's graduation at the University of Kansas. You and I don't talk about our kids very often, but I've had reason and very proud of my daughter and her accomplishments. So graduation, I went back. I also went to school there, so it's my alma mater, and I love the speeches. I love the campus vibe, the energy, the joy, the emotion that graduates and parents come. It's like hope springs eternal, right? And I just love it. I had such a good time. A lot of kids or a lot of guys I went to college with are my age, obviously. But my point is that they have kids that are my kids' age, and so I got to see them and a lot of remember whens at the bar, where it's like, you remember the time when yada 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 and everything. So I just had an amazing time this weekend. It was great, and I had not talked about this, but I'm gonna or not mention it. My daughter sent something to me, and I'm going to read this here. I'm not going to read all of them, but she said, lessons I've learned from rowing. And some of them are kind of cliche-ish, but I like this one, is that you won't always be chosen, and life goes on. Reaction and criticism will come often. Don't let it wreck you. Pushing through pain and gaining mental toughness. It feels good to push limits. Where's this one? How to recognize weakness, how to recognize weakness amongst a group and address appropriately. So she's kicking all these quotes out and stuff, and I was just like, she's an amazing individual. I'm so proud of her. And the one thing I think of, and I know you'll know this one from Semisonic, where it said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a lyric you probably heard from that song, but I kind of thought of that multiple times this week, is that, yes, it's an end, but there's also a beginning, because this beginning came from another end.
Well, clearly your daughter is much wiser than you and I were when we graduated from college. I did not have a lot of deep thinking going on.
Nope.
I just couldn't wait to get the hell out of Castine, Maine. But that's beautiful to hear. And I think, as a parent, it must be incredibly edifying and comforting to see that your daughter has her crap together. So that's beautiful to hear, man. Yeah. I barely remember my graduation day. It was a blur from undergrad. It was constant, it was getting up in the morning, getting commissioned in the Navy, going to graduation. My mom was there, my aunt was there, my girlfriend was there. Like, it was madness. And then, the next day it's like it was all over. It was very strange to wake up and realize I'm out of college, And then for graduate school, when I got out of Harvard, it was the same. It was a different feeling, an entirely different feeling of, I'm an adult now. This is just a ceremony. I just want my piece of paper. Thank God I'm done. No more paying for my tuition. But when I go back to the yard, I know the tree that my chair was next to in the yard. And I've often gone back and tried to remember that day of my mom being there and how proud she was. But for Durham, I didn't go to graduation. Just got a letter. I was like the end of that. And it just that moment when you're young, you tell young people, soak it all up. This may not ever happen again. Soak it all up. And I kind of wished that I had that day. And, it's good advice, I suppose. And it's nice to hear your daughter didn't just soak up that day, but it sounds like she soaked up 4 years of a good education. So congrats, Doug. You got one more in the chamber, right?
No, Will graduated last year. So the one in the chamber is kick him out of the nest and move up to Steamboat. That's the plan.
You going to tell them the address? Or you're going to keep that secret so they can't come ruin your empty nest?
Well, I've tried to keep the address secret, but you got Google and my wife and yada, yada, yada. So I am sure I will see them a lot. But anyway, I'm trying to kick them out.
Yeah, it happens, buddy. It happens. All right. Well, bring us to the next one, pal.
All right. So again, at the beginning, I said that both of my topics are kind of parcel related. The first one was more about the post office, flexing a little bit and seeing what they can do with their muscle. This one is about cross branding on online returns. So UPS has this return division called Happy Returns, and they just partnered up with Forever 21. That's the store, right? I'm sure you have shopped there multiple times in your life. And they are allowing Happy Returns is partnered with Forever 21. So Shein returns can go to Forever 21. You can go there and you can drop it off. Kohl's has a similar program with Amazon. And with Kohl's, you walk in there, you got to walk to the back of the store, which is by design. You stand in line, not very long. I've done this before, and they got a pretty good operation going. You can literally just hand them your crap and they'll put it in a bag and do whatever. And then you get a coupon that if you use that day, whenever you're there, you can get some discounts. So Kohl's did it with success. We'll see if Forever 21, how that plays out. But the bottom line on this one, Pete, that I'll end with is that returns, especially with fast fashion, where the price point is just so small, the cost to move it back up in the return supply chain, and there's all kinds of programs and things out there that are involved with it that have a great merit and are very valuable. But if you're dealing with a shirt or whatever that you got for $10, you got to keep that in market. Once the product is in the market, meaning the local market, you got to keep it there. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a pop-up store, right, where you go into Forever 21, and in the corner is the Shein return area. And as they return it, they'll double check it, stick it on the rack. You can get it super cheap, maybe keep it up there for a week, sell whatever you can, and then bundle it up and send it back. But I like the idea, the creativity of managing returns, because it's inevitable. It's going to stick around a long time. And it is sure a hard nut to crack. So it can be cost effective, but yet efficient for the consumer. So I love this. Kohl's did it, and Forever 21 is right behind him, and I like it.
I like this topic a lot, Doug, because it's something I've actually thought a lot about, but I haven't done enough research into. I'd be fascinated, and I should have done it today, but this morning got away from me. You might not believe this, Doug, but I generally have on like a collared shirt up until it's time to do the show.
Okay.
And then I change into my dirtbag outfit, and then I get dressed for work. I mean, it's ridiculous, I know, but it's we have a brand here. But I wanted to look up what percentage of shoppers, when they return something to these places, actually buy something there. Is there any way? I mean, with that coupon, that's a great way to be able to tell, right? Because they got that coupon, and now they can track who used that coupon. But I return stuff to Amazon at Whole Foods, so there's one that's pretty convenient. I drop by, I drop it off, but I very rarely do shopping at Whole Foods. It just happens to be easy for me to drop it off there. But now Forever 21, I wonder if they'll be, I'm sure they will be, right, tracking sales from people that have come in and done this. It's got to be a great way for a win-win to happen. And I'd love to know if it's probably more of a win for the retail outlet than it is for the company who's getting their returns.
Yeah, spot on. You're exactly right. So, Good deal. All right, bring us home, my friend. What's your final topic?
Oh, well, I say this in my seminars, and I think it's an important piece of anecdotal evidence. I come from big families, big Catholic families, big farming families. My grandfather had 12 brothers and sisters, and in a 2-bedroom apartment in the north end of Boston. It was normal to have bigger families than what we have today. It was pretty normal, particularly in farming communities and more rural communities, to have 4 or 5 kids, to have 3 or 4 or 5 kids. And today it simply isn't. Children are an expensive hobby, and having them can be a real financial responsibility that having too many of them can really, it can ruin your chances of maybe retiring. It's not cheap to have a bunch of kids anymore. And to that end, also, you have a lot of women who have very fulfilling careers and they don't want to leave them necessarily early or to continue developing them necessarily early because they want to stay home with the child. And being pregnant puts gaps in their ability to be competitive. It's a real problem that we have with our society. So the Wall Street Journal today put out an article that I've just been hammering for years, that the industrialized economies around the world are in a real serious nosedive with regards to population. The first one that we got a real look at was Japan. Their number of babies per woman being born now is hovering at 1. It may go below 1, which means that for every woman that lives in that country, they're currently having less than 1 child. In America, we're below 2 right now. We're at 1.68. We need to have 2.2 children every year to make up for the people who pass away in this country. And you can point to basically any industrialized society. Why that's a problem is that imports and importing are an important part of trade, as are, in the case of China, continuing to have children so that they can continue to build their workforce as well as their consumption base. As our population continues to dwindle, and as these major economies continue to have stress with this, it takes on all kinds of problems that come along with it. Being able to hold a large standing army, as an example, it's a pretty big one. The statistics of having geniuses, people that are scientifically gifted, clever, intelligent people going through universities, it's really a math game. The more people you have with these learned PhDs and master's degrees and undergraduate degrees, the more likely you are to have clever ideas thought up. And it looks like we're going to hit around 500 million people in this country at some point, probably before 2150. And then after that, it's going to begin to surreptitiously, drop in a big, big way, where we'll probably be lucky if we ever see 300 million Americans again. So it's a worldwide phenomena. There's all kinds of factors that are leading to it, but it has a major, major drain in the global economy. So countries are doing what they can to try to promote parenthood. Having more than 2 children now more than 1 child will get you paid in China. Having 3 will get you really paid. And that's also the case in Japan, where there are entire swaths of their country that are filled with empty houses and empty schools because people just simply aren't starting families anymore.
Yeah. That's a heavy topic, and it is definitely global in nature. And I would agree 100% all the statistics that you hear out there. And, we have kids in that demographic, right? I've referenced it a lot in the last couple of weeks, but I got a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old, right? And just seeing how they interact with the opposite sex, what's important to them here and now. And you can't just go from hanging out with your buddies to having kids. There's a process involved, right? And that process is happening later and later, right? And I think a key thing that you mentioned is women in the workforce and finding enjoyment and challenge, not just with family and kids. So I'm seeing it firsthand, right? Like when I graduated, and I don't want to be that old guy, but I talk about weather at the beginning of this show. But I don't know how many guys are married and have kids from their college sweetheart that were kind of in that mode a couple years out of school. And now I don't see these kids. Like that process starts after they're 25 or even into their late 20s or early 30s. So I think it's real. I think there's unintended consequences that we're going to continue to peel the onion back and say, wow, I didn't realize this was going to happen based on this delay. But it's something to keep an eye out for. And I agree with you 100%.
Well, Doug, I can only speak for my ancestors, but it was only a few generations ago. So you're talking maybe 100 years ago, where it was very common for the people in my family, the women in my family, to be married at 15 and 16 years old and to start having families because, let's be honest, many of them didn't live past their mid-40s or early 50s. So it was just part of the way things worked. And now, I've had the fortune of raising 4 kids. Only one of them, is genetically mine, but I think of all of them as mine. And, from 26 to 18, not a one of them is even considering anytime soon having a child. Mm-hmm. So I know that there are pockets of the country, there are pockets of our society where that isn't the case. But even on farms now, Doug, farmers don't have big families. They rely on mechanized labor. They rely on automation and hiring help because it's actually less expensive than having a child. So it is something I'm going to continue to watch for as long as I can and listen to people a lot smarter than me speculate on what's going to happen next. But I think overall, Doug, it's going to be a problem that we're going to reap a lot of negativity for centuries because of.
Yeah, agreed.
All right.
Well, that kind of wraps us up on this one, global trade this week. I'm glad we got it in early before you made your cross-country flight. And best to you on Thursday. So next week's show, we'll have to see what your playlist was. And more importantly, the response of the audience to your playlist. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Doug, I'm a born entertainer. I'm a national treasure, and you should know that by now.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I do know that. And what I also know is that you and I appreciate our listeners for coming every single week to listen to Global Trade, brought to you by Cap Logistics. Please check out their website, caplogistics.com. Thank you for listening to the show. We will catch you next week. Until then, thank you so much. And Pete, travel safe.
Thanks, buddy. See you next week.
All right. Take care.